We do have breaking news tonight, a deeply divided moment playing out in American history as we come on the air. President Trump has just been impeached on both Article 1, abuse of power, and on Article 2, obstruction of Congress. The votes down party lines as predicted. And all day long here, we've been watching the short bursts of anger, the closing arguments from both sides. Democrats arguing the evidence was clear, arguing the president used the power of his office for personal and political gain with this election coming.
Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that we are standing on the precipice of a constitutional crisis so profound that it makes the turbulence of the last decade look like a mere rehearsal? And perhaps more importantly, is this renewed push for accountability a genuine effort to save the republic, or is it the desperate final act of a fractured political system preparing for the 2026 midterms? We find ourselves in a moment of unparalleled political volatility. As we navigate the complex landscape of 2025, the air in Washington, D.C. is thick with a tension that is palpable, heavy, and undeniably historic. We are witnessing a scenario that many political scholars deemed unlikely, if not impossible: the ignition of a full-scale impeachment storm during the second term of President Donald Trump. This is not a rehash of 2019, nor is it a simple echo of the chaotic days of 2021. This is something entirely different, a convergence of legislative strategy, genuine constitutional anxiety, and raw political warfare that threatens to consume the legislative agenda and reshape the legacy of the 47th President of the United States. Before we dive deeper into the specifics of these resolutions and the strategy behind them, if you appreciate independent analysis that cuts through the noise, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us get this information out to more people who are looking for the truth in these chaotic times. To truly understand the gravity of this moment, we must first appreciate the unprecedented context in which these events are unfolding. We are in the year 2025. Donald Trump has secured a second term, a feat that defied the expectations of his critics and solidified his grip on the Republican Party. Yet, rather than a honeymoon period or a time of legislative triumph, his administration has been met with a legislative firewall that is burning hotter than ever before. Congress has just dropped not one, but two distinct impeachment resolutions against the sitting president. The internet, the media, and the halls of Congress are vibrating with the shockwaves of this development. If these proceedings move forward to their ultimate conclusion, we are looking at a historic anomaly. Trump would become the first president in American history to be impeached during a second term. Furthermore, given his history, he faces the prospect of being impeached 3 times in total, a statistic that would place him in a category of 1, fundamentally altering how future historians view the stability of the American executive branch. This is not merely the shouting of a few disgruntled backbenchers. The resolutions in question are backed by over 210 House sponsors. That number is critical. It signifies that this is not a fringe movement of angry Democrats yelling into the void. It is a legitimate, organized, and powerful legislative movement with actual momentum. The sheer volume of support indicates a unified Democratic caucus that has decided the risks of inaction outweigh the risks of political backlash. They are moving with a speed and coordination that suggests this offensive has been in the planning stages since the moment the inauguration festivities concluded. Now, to understand why the president loses it, as the headlines suggest, we have to look closely at the substance of this storm, the resolutions themselves. These are not vague complaints about his rhetoric. They are formal charges of high crimes and misdemeanors, dense and brutal in their legal language. Let's start by examining House Resolution 353, which was introduced back in April 2025 and serves as the primary vehicle for this impeachment effort. It lists 7 separate articles of impeachment. The number 7 is significant. It suggests a throw-everything-at-the-wall approach. But upon closer inspection, it reveals a comprehensive critique of the president's governance style. The most jarring of these charges is bribery. Yes, bribery. This word carries a specific constitutional weight because it is one of the 2 crimes explicitly mentioned in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, as grounds for impeachment. The resolution alleges that the president has conditioned federal aid and government action on personal political favors, a charge that echoes the controversies of his first term, but is framed here with new evidence and new context. Beyond bribery, the resolution accuses the president of obstructing justice by interfering with ongoing federal investigations. It claims he has usurped congressional powers, effectively stealing the authority that the Constitution grants to the legislative branch. It further accuses him of creating unlawful offices, establishing positions of power within the federal government without the necessary congressional oversight or approval. Perhaps most abstractly, but most dangerously for a democracy, it accuses him of violations of due process and a general abuse of power that critics argue has turned the executive branch into a personal kingdom. As if 7 articles were not enough, June 2025 saw the introduction of House Resolution 537, adding a layer of gravity concerning national security and the lives of American service members. This resolution focuses specifically on the unauthorized use of military force. The charges allege that the president has deployed troops and engaged in military action without congressional approval, a direct violation of the War Powers Act. The language here is scathing. Proponents of the resolution argue that the president is a direct threat to American democracy. They accuse him of inciting authoritarianism, drawing direct parallels to the dark days of January 6th. The central argument is that by bypassing Congress on matters of war, the president is stripping the people's representatives of their most solemn duty, the decision to send the nation's youth into harm's way. They argue these deployments were not driven by legitimate national security concerns, but by political calculations intended to bolster his image as a wartime leader. This brings me to a critical question I want to ask you. After hearing these charges, bribery, creating unlawful offices, and unauthorized military force, do you believe these are legitimate grounds to remove a sitting president, or do you see this as just another chapter of political theater? I really want to know what you think, so please pause for a second and leave your thoughts in the comments below. You might be asking, why is this happening now? Why, in the first year of a second term, is the country being dragged back into the impeachment trench? The answer lies in the harsh realities of the political calendar and the specific dynamics of 2025. We are heading rapidly toward the 2026 midterm elections, and the Democratic Party, looking to retake the House and potentially make gains in the Senate, faces a strategic imperative. They need something big. They need an event that energizes their base, dominates the news cycle, and forces every single Republican member of Congress to go on the record defending the president. Impeachment is the nuclear option of political strategy. It sucks the oxygen out of the room. It prevents the president from effectively messaging on the economy or his legislative wins. Strategically, Democrats are banking on the fact that the president's approval ratings are slipping. Current polling suggests he is hovering around 42% approval. The economy is not performing as promised. Inflation remains a stubborn thorn in the side of the American consumer, and the immigration system is widely perceived as a mess. By launching an impeachment inquiry now, Democrats are creating a perfect storm. They are layering a constitutional crisis on top of an economic malaise. The goal is to make the president toxic, to attach the stench of scandal to him so thoroughly that moderate voters in suburban swing districts will abandon the Republican Party in 2026. It is a high-stakes gamble, but one that leadership has evidently decided is worth taking. On the other side of the aisle, however, the Republican defense is fierce and dismissive. They view these resolutions not as a solemn constitutional duty, but as partisan theater. The prevailing narrative among the president's defenders is that the Democratic base has never accepted the results of the 2024 election. They see this as the continuation of a decade-long witch hunt designed to destroy a political movement they cannot defeat at the ballot box. Regarding the specific charges of war powers violations, Republicans point to history. They argue, with some validity, that every modern president has stretched the definition of unauthorized military force. They cite Obama in Libya, Bush in the Middle East, and Clinton in the Balkans. They ask, why is it an impeachable offense when Trump does it, but a police action when a Democrat does it? They argue that the president is merely exercising his Article 2 powers as commander-in-chief and that Congress is trying to micromanage foreign policy. But despite all the sound and fury of the House proceedings, we face a hard mathematical reality in the United States Senate. We must be honest about how impeachment actually works, because the headlines often mislead the public. Impeachment, which happens in the House, is equivalent to an indictment in a criminal court. It is merely the formal accusation. The House acts as the grand jury. Given that the Democrats have the numbers and the co-sponsors, it is highly likely, almost a certainty, that the House will vote to impeach. Donald Trump will likely bear the stain of impeachment once again. But removal, the actual stripping of power, happens in the Senate. And the bar for removal is set intentionally high by the Founding Fathers, a 2/3 majority. That means 67 senators must vote to convict. Let's look at the map. Republicans currently control 53 seats in the Senate. To reach 67 votes, Democrats would need every single one of their own members to vote guilty, plus they would need to convince at least 14 Republican senators to cross the aisle and vote to remove the leader of their own party. When was the last time we saw 14 Republican senators break with Trump on anything that mattered? The answer is practically never. The modern Republican Party is built around loyalty to the president. For a Republican senator to vote for conviction, they would be effectively ending their own political career. They would face a primary challenge from the right, they would be vilified by conservative media, and they would be alienated from their donor base. Unless a major bombshell drops, evidence so undeniable and so horrific that it shatters the president's support with his own base, the Senate trial is destined to end in acquittal. The president will likely walk away from this process just as he did the previous 2 times, impeached but still in power and claiming total vindication. This reality leads us to the million-dollar question. Is this worth it? The strategic calculation is fraught with danger for both sides. Consider the risk for Democrats first. The danger is that this effort backfires spectacularly. We saw a version of this in 2019. After the first impeachment, Trump's approval ratings actually ticked up. His base rallied around him. He raised record amounts of money by claiming he was a victim of the deep state. If the public perceives this 2025 impeachment as merely a partisan vendetta, Democrats risk looking obsessed. They risk appearing as if they are ignoring the kitchen table issues that actually affect voters' lives: the price of groceries, the cost of gas, the safety of their neighborhoods. If voters conclude that Democrats are more interested in destroying Trump than in fixing the economy, the 2026 midterms could turn into a bloodbath for the left. Furthermore, if the impeachment fails in the Senate, as predicted, it hands Trump a victory lap. He gets to stand at the podium and declare that he beat the system again. He gets to play the ultimate survivor, the man who stood against the entire Washington establishment and won. That is a powerful narrative to take into a campaign season. However, Republicans are not safe either. While they may feel secure in the Senate math, they are tying their political fortunes to a volatile anchor. Trump's approval rating is already low. If the impeachment hearings reveal damaging testimony, if witnesses take the stand and paint a picture of a chaotic, lawless, and dangerous White House, that approval rating could dip into the 30s. At that level, the political gravity shifts. Senators in swing states, those up for re-election in purple jurisdictions, might start to get nervous. They might decide that defending the president is a suicide mission for their own careers. While getting 14 defections is unlikely, even a few cracks in the armor would be a devastating signal of weakness. It would show that Trump's grip on the party is finally slipping. Amidst this clash of titans, the American public stands weary. There is a profound sense of fatigue. Most minds are already made up. We are a polarized nation inhabiting 2 different realities. Half the country sees a criminal who must be stopped. The other half sees a hero being persecuted. The danger of this polarization is apathy. Because impeachment is a legalistic, procedural affair, it can be boring. It involves lawyers arguing about subpoenas and scholars debating the definition of high crimes. After the initial explosion of interest, viewership tends to drop. People tune out. The risk is that the storm becomes just another background noise in an already noisy world. While the cameras are pointed at the impeachment hearings, we must ask a critical question. What is happening in the shadows? This is perhaps the most critical aspect of the analysis. Impeachment is a massive distraction. It consumes the media oxygen. It forces the White House to operate in a defensive crouch. But governance does not stop. The president still holds the pen. He still controls the executive branch. While Congress argues, the administration is likely pushing through executive orders, rolling back regulations, and appointing judges that will shape the legal landscape for decades. Smart political operators know how to use chaos as cover. While the public is arguing about whether the president committed bribery, the administration could be quietly reshaping environmental policy, altering labor laws, or shifting foreign alliances. The Trump loses it narrative might be true in terms of his emotional reaction to the charges, but in terms of policy implementation, his administration might be more focused than ever, using the distraction to push through an agenda that would otherwise face intense scrutiny. Finally, we must consider the long-term damage to the American system. Regardless of how one feels about Donald Trump, the normalization of impeachment is a dangerous precedent. The Founding Fathers designed impeachment as an emergency brake, a break glass in case of emergency option for truly egregious threats to the republic. If impeachment becomes a standard tool of political warfare, something that happens every time the opposing party controls the House, we are entering a new and unstable era. We are effectively telling the electorate that elections do not settle anything. We are saying that the losers of an election can simply try to overturn the result through legislative maneuvering. This erodes faith in democracy. It makes the public cynical. It signals to the world that the United States is no longer a stable beacon of democracy, but a fractured giant at war with itself. It emboldens adversaries like China and Russia, who point to our dysfunction as proof that authoritarianism is the superior model. And yet, there is another dimension to this crisis that we ignore at our own peril, a dimension that was barely in its infancy during the struggles of the last decade, but has now matured into a formidable weapon in 2025. We are no longer operating in the information environment of the past. The battle for public opinion today is being waged on a landscape fundamentally altered by artificial intelligence and synthetic media. In 2025, the very concept of evidence is under siege. As Congress releases documents and transcripts, we must brace ourselves for a deluge of AI-generated counter-narratives, deepfake audio recordings, and synthetic video clips designed to blur the lines between fact and fiction. This is not science fiction. It is the new frontier of political warfare. When a smoking gun tape is released, half the country will believe it is damning proof of guilt, while the other half will be convinced by their algorithmic feeds that it is a digital fabrication created by the deep state. This technological fog of war makes the task of impeachment, which relies on a shared acceptance of facts, nearly impossible. It accelerates the tribalism that is already tearing us apart, ensuring that no matter what truth is uncovered, it will be instantly neutralized by a synthetic lie that travels halfway around the world before the truth can even tie its shoes. Furthermore, we must cast our gaze toward the one institution that has so far remained on the periphery of this specific conflict, but will inevitably be dragged into its center: the Supreme Court. If this impeachment escalates into a battle over subpoenas, executive privilege, and the very limits of presidential immunity, the court will be forced to intervene. This is a court that is already facing a historic crisis of legitimacy, polarized along ideological lines and viewed with suspicion by a significant portion of the electorate. Imagine a scenario where the president, emboldened by his second term, explicitly defies a Supreme Court order to turn over evidence, claiming that his mandate from the people supersedes the check of an unelected judiciary. Such a move would transform a political crisis into a constitutional catastrophe, breaking the fragile tripod of our government and forcing the justices to decide whether they are loyal to a political movement or to the Constitution itself. The stakes of such a confrontation cannot be overstated. It would test the rule of law in a way we haven't seen since the days of Nixon, but in a far more volatile and heavily armed political climate. As we watch this storm unfold, we must remain vigilant. The outcome in the House seems preordained: impeachment. The outcome in the Senate seems equally preordained: acquittal. But history is rarely a straight line. We are waiting for the unknown unknowns. In every investigation, rocks are turned over, and things crawl out that no one expected. A witness flips, a document leaks, a recording surfaces. The volatility of the situation means that while the smart money is on the status quo, the possibility of a black swan event remains. The impeachment of 2025 is more than just a political battle. It is a stress test for the American Constitution. It is a question of whether our institutions can withstand the pressure of hyperpartisanship. It asks whether truth still matters, or if we have fully descended into a post-truth era where political tribalism dictates reality. So, as the hearings begin and the rhetoric heats up, look past the headlines. Look past the breathless reporting of the cable news pundits. Watch the approval ratings. Watch the quiet maneuvers of the executive branch. And most importantly, ask yourself, is this the system working as intended, or is this the sound of the machinery finally breaking down? The storm is here. The president is fighting for his legacy. Congress is fighting for its relevance. And the American people are watching, waiting to see if their democracy can weather yet another hurricane. Thank you.